And we're live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second episode of Soc Talk. And today we're also joined by Vikas. Vikas is here.
Hello, hi.
So, Vikas is an alumnus of Jindal Global University and also a former member of the Film Society. So, today we're actually going to be talking about something really interesting with the intersection of music and film. So, Vikas, do you want to tell them what we're talking about?
First of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
Likewise.
I think as we all know, I mean, it's great that we are doing this. I think fundamentally, film and cinemas. I think everybody knows that it's not just a visual medium, right? It's not just a visual art form. It's a visual and audio art form, and the music plays a huge role for. Music as such plays a major role in cinema. It can lift a film, it can lift a scene, and it's a very very powerful way to to convey emotions, and it sets the mood for the scenes in multiple films. And especially in Hollywood, of course, original score is a major thing. In India, of course, every movie has songs, and the placement of songs is very important. And I don't watch too much Bollywood, but I watch a lot of South Indian movies, and I think it's probably the same in Bollywood as well, where that sometimes people go to certain films just because the music is so good, right?
Yeah,
So music plays a very very important role in film throughout the world, and I think it's wonderful that we are talking about this, and talking about some of the greatest scores, some of the scores that we've enjoyed, of course.
Yeah, we have a really interesting list. I mean, it's short but also comprehensive of what we're going to be talking about. So, like you said, I'm also guilty of one of those people who would go to the movie just to listen to the soundtrack or the album as such. So, I think we've all been there and we've all done that. But today we're going to be talking about 5 interesting film scores and also really great movies. Besides that, first movie on our list.
Oh, of course. Okay, so the first film that we did want to talk about is Rocky. I mean, it's not a. I think the entire series, the Rocky theme, I think is extremely iconic. The Rocky film series itself is a very iconic movie franchise when it comes to sports films. People wouldn't probably be. I don't know how many people would rank it as a great artistic masterpiece, but in terms of the quality of the films, but I think in terms of sports films and in terms of boxing, it has a certain level of cult status. And I think the first thing that anybody associates, of course, other than Sylvester Stallone, when someone hears the Rocky theme, it's so recognizable, it's so distinct, and it's obviously a very very well-known tune. It's obviously parodied a lot, spoofed a lot, and covered a lot. But I think it's very iconic because the way the tune is used throughout the movies, in all 6 films. I think in moments of defeat, in moments of victory, especially when the theme song plays, and combined with the direction and the brilliant performance that Stallone gives, I think it really really lifts the mood. It's a very inspirational tune, and it's used in his training montages very popularly in the 4th film, and it's used after his victories. I think it's a very inspirational, very motivating tune, and the tune really complements the mood of the scene that we're talking about, right? It's very uplifting. So I think it's one of the most iconic pieces of music ever produced.
I think
in terms of films. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree. I think what's really special about this movie, and I was reading a little bit, is that they had a huge budget constraint. And I think Bill Conti was the 3rd choice for the music composer, and so it was not the first pick for the movie and the movie set. And apparently Bill Conti had never seen a boxing game before this movie, so it was quite a challenge. And I think in one of his interviews he also says that he was watching old boxing scenes, and then he would have a Beethoven symphony going on in the background, and he described it as ballet. So it's really interesting how someone never seen a boxing game could actually produce a legendary theme for sports film like that.
I think it's also interesting because the movie, of course, it's about a wrestler who overcomes all odds, and a boxer who overcomes all odds, and he has these great victories. And that's very reminiscent of how Sylvester Stallone's career in film was. Like, when, like you said, when he started the Rocky franchise, he didn't have too much money. The studio wasn't funding the films too much, and he went through multiple studio houses to try and get the film done. And he wanted to act in it. The studio said you can't. And like you said, there were actually so many budget constraints that there are some scenes in the film which are actually mistakes, and they didn't have enough money to cover up the mistakes or reshoot, and so they just went ahead with it. There's a very poignant scene in the first film where before Rocky's first match, he goes up and he sees two banners, and he sees that the color of his shorts in the big banner in the stadium is wrong, and he has this dialogue with his other friend, and he says, the colors are wrong. That's an entire scene, but that scene was actually completely improvised because they had made a mistake in the art, and they didn't have enough money to take it down and redo the entire art with the correct thing. So it's a story that's very reminiscent of how Sylvester Stallone had to struggle to become the global superstar he is that he is today. But fundamentally, I think the point is that the movie, the music of the film really, really uplifts and sets the tone. The whole feeling of an underdog who becomes a champion. I think the music really complements the tone of the movie.
Definitely. I think it has a very narrative pickup, the music and the film, which is what makes it very special, and which is what puts it on our list today. So the second movie we're going to be talking about is the Pink Panther series. And I think this is one of Vikas's favorite themes, because he instantly told me that this is what he wanted to bring up. So do you have anything to say about the Pink Panther?
I think Pink Panther is mostly nostalgia value for me, because as a kid I used to love the show, I used to love the franchise, and one of the most the memory that's etched in my mind the most is hearing the tune. I think it is, for me, in my opinion, without a doubt, the greatest piece of music ever composed for a comedy film, hands down. I think it's so iconic, it's so quirky. I mean, everybody recognizes the tune, and the whole point of the tune is it's a very fun, silly tune, right? It's not a great orchestra. It's not like you don't have a crescendo, and it's not a very complex piece of music, and even if you're trying to learn the keyboard or something, it's a very simple tune. Like it doesn't take too much for you to learn the tune and play the tune on yourself, which is very fascinating, because I used to play the tune all the time whenever I got the chance. And it's so quirky, it's so silly, it's so fun, and for a comedy film, what more do you need? Like I think and especially a comedy film with Clouseau, who's with slapstick humor, and who's this bumbling idiot kind of a detective. I think the theme for that movie, hearing the theme makes me laugh. I mean, that's how iconic that film, the score is, and I mean, I'm sure everyone knows the tune, and I'm sure everyone will recognize the tune when it's played over. Yeah. And it's just incredibly iconic. I mean, there's nothing else to say, and hands down for me, the most iconic pieces of music for a comedy film. I can't think of anything else.
Yeah, I think you made perfect sense when you said that. I mean, these are the kind of tunes which sit well with the audience even after the movie's over. And I mean, at its crux, it's a combination of jazz music and swing music. And I think the best part about this is there are also multiple versions on the internet, restrung versions and covers of the Pink Panther, and one sung in the major key, and then there's double bass added to it. That makes it really special, because you can modify it however you want to, and it'll still take you back to the original theme.
And I think the director and the filmmakers made wonderful use of the theme throughout the film. Of course, there are multiple films; they are not a part of the same film series or something, right?
Yeah.
But I think every filmmaker was blessed to be given this tune, because they used it in their films, I think, very wonderfully. There are the one scene that I really remember a lot from one of the movies, I don't remember which one, is when Clouseau is hanging by a truck or something, and he's trying to catch this criminal. He's hanging by a truck, and it's this really funny scene where he's trying to catch the criminal, but he's hanging out of a truck window and he's flailing around. And he runs on the side of a van on the street, and there's a keyboard that's just lying on the street. I think someone has a keyboard and they just left it on the street. And he tries to balance himself on the keyboard, and he runs all across the keyboard, and they play the tune at that moment. And And when that happens, I just burst out into laughter. Like for 5 minutes straight, I couldn't control, laughing. It's so iconic. It's so. I think sometimes there are pieces of music that are made that just it's not just with film. I guess with advertisements, or even with separate music albums. I think sometimes some artists create pieces of music that will forever be associated with them, or that will forever be associated with one particular thing. And it almost reaches cult status, really. And for me, the Pink Panther theme is that. I mean, there's no other way to put that.
I mean, for you personally, it also resonates with the animated version, and then even
the
movies. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Alright, so the next movie on our list is, it's not a very big guess. You'll probably guess that it'd be on a list where we talk about film and music, and it's La La Land. It's a modern musical day, and I think the problem with La La Land, I would say there is one problematic aspect of La La Land, that a lot of songs in the movie, they go unnoticed, and Mia and Sebastian's themes stand out. I'm not sure if people actually catch this problem with the movie, but I felt it a lot, because I think there are brilliant songs in the La La Land album. There's Another Day in the Sun, there's Planetarium, but all of these songs go unnoticed because I think it was advertised in a way, and it was sort of marketed in a way that Mia and Sebastian's theme really stood out. I mean, it's also the first song that the composers produced for this movie. And I think there's a trivia about La La Land. I'm not sure if our audience know this, but Ryan Gosling, he learned the piano, and all the scenes where he's shot playing the piano, it was all done by him in a span of 3 months. So I think that's super impressive about La La Land. But I think particularly for me, this music and film with La La Land work, because otherwise it's a very generic storyline. La La Land, it's about a love story, about how it doesn't work out and they part ways. But I think what's really special about this movie is the score of this movie, and I think that's why it's on our list, because you have
I completely agree. I think story-wise, it's a very generic story. I don't think it's not a very different story or a novel story that we have when we look at La La Land. It's a very generic story. It's a very simple story. Yeah. But like we were discussing earlier, I think La La Land is one of the perfect examples of where music elevates a film to a whole another level, and really, really pushes the film to the stratosphere or something. I think the reason why La La Land worked, and it worked so well, is because of the music. And musicals are not new to Hollywood, but it's one of the first high quality, high budget musicals that I've seen in a long time. Of course, the cinematography is great, and technically the movie is great, right? It's bad film by any standards. I mean, the story is generic, but I wouldn't call it a bad movie. I know there are people who call the movie overrated, but I think I genuinely think it's a good movie. It's a very enjoyable movie. It's a fun movie to watch. What I do really like about the music in the movie is, of course, you mentioned it, the background is beautiful, and there are so many songs that go unnoticed. But I will talk about the song that got probably the most attention, City of Stars. But I think what was lovely for me is that I think it's the first time I've seen both the actors obviously perform the song, right? And what I loved about City of Stars is their average singing. Like, they are not great singers, they're not out of the world singers who hit great pitches and voice notes or something. It was very simple. It was very nonchalant, and it was very realistic to me. And I haven't heard of someone when you know that the person singing is not a great performer of music and a wonderful singer. It would have been very easy to do what our movies do and just use another playback singer and dub, or probably even just get two actors who can sing great. There were a lot of interesting choices that the filmmakers made. The fact that they brought in two actors who did really give in a good performance, and they stuck with their originality, they stuck with their voices. It's not like it's a mind-blowing out. City of Stars especially, it's a very realistic it's not great things. No one's going to hear that and think, wow, the singers did a great job. That's not the first impression you get. But I think it was very simple, and the idea behind it was very simple. And of course, the way it's used in the movie, it comes in a very pivotal point in the film where both characters are, undergoing a major change in their lives. And I think the music of the film overall was great, and I think it really lifted the film for me. I personally do not know if I would have enjoyed the movie so much if the music of the film had not been that good, and that's why it deserves to be on this list.
Yeah, definitely. I think the whole album is put across to the audience as a very raw version of all songs. I mean, it's not what you expect out of a movie from La La Land. But I think it really worked well for me. And I think when the composers, when the movie was releasing and the composers talking about their music and how their composition went about, I think they called it a balance of nostalgia and modernity. And I think there was no better way to put it out there. I mean, that resonates with you. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So the next film on our list is Interstellar. And it's another obvious pick. I think people watching this would have expected this film to be there. But definitely for me, Hans Zimmer, of course, legendary. He's one of the most iconic music composers in film of all time. He will go down a legend. He's going to be celebrated for years to come. And every time you see Hans Zimmer in a film, Hans Zimmer as a music composer for a film, especially if you like music and if you like cinema, and you're definitely going to go watch the movie. And it's true for any of his films, right? Even when he did Superman or something, the music that he gives to his films is really fantastic. It really lifts the movie, and it's a very integral part of the movies that he's a part of. With Interstellar, I think it just went to another different level. I think the music for the film, throughout the movie, I think the music was just perfect. I couldn't find fault with anything. And there are certain scenes, of course, Interstellar, it's a very scientific film, and it's, there are a lot of scenes that are really intense technically, where and all of that. There is this one particular scene that I remember called the docking scene, where they're in space and they're trying to dock or whatever. Everyone remembers the scene. And for me, I just remember sitting in the theater and being in awe of the music, because I think cinematographically it was great. It was shot. It was a very slow shot, and it was done beautifully. But the way the music complemented the scene, and the way the music really lifted the scene and made the scene very, very intense. And I think that's something only Hans Zimmer can do. I think that piece of music, that piece of composition, especially at the docking scene, I think it's just a Hans Zimmer special. Of course, there are other scenes that stick, that really jump out at me now when I'm talking about it. The fields, when they're chasing through the UFO in the fields. That's a type, that very specific field of music. That's something that I can download, and you can sit and listen to it at any point of time. It's so soothing. It's so calming. You don't even need the visuals. You just sit down and you hear the piece of music that he's composed, and it just transports you into another level, into another planet. And I think it's just one of Hans Zimmer's best works, and that's saying a lot, because he does a lot of good work.
Yeah. Actually, contrary to popular belief, I wouldn't call Interstellar a very science fiction genre of film. I think for me, Interstellar was very emotional, because I think when it released, I was still in school, and I think when it, the scene where the protagonist actually meets his daughter in the hospital bed, I think that scene was very, very emotional. And then there's silence, and then there's sound after that, which makes that scene really special, and it sort of connects to the audience, which is what makes Interstellar very special, and for me, more emotional than science fiction. And
you're right. And another example of a scene like that I can point out is when he is in space and he's receiving this video message.
Oh yeah.
And he's just sitting there and he's crying. Of course, Matthew McConaughey gives a fantastic performance. And one very important thing that you did mention is the silence, right? And I think Hans Zimmer is a master at using that, because in film, it's not just about the music that you score and how that lifts the scene. I think it's a very well-known thing that you need to know when to not have any music as well. when you just let the actors and let the crew take over and do their job, and the silence itself can be so poignant. And the scene that we were talking about, I think that's a perfect example of using silence, right? Where you just stay silent, you let the actors do their job, you let the actors do their job, and then when you come back with the music, you come back with the score, it just makes it that much more effective. And I think Interstellar is just a masterclass in filmmaking. I mean, of course, it's a very emotional film. It's a drama, right? It's a very emotional film. That's root. That the theme is science fiction, but there's a lot of emotion and there's a lot of drama going on. And of course, the music of the movie, it's iconic, and it's going to be remembered for years to come for many reasons. The film, and I think music is definitely going to be one of those reasons.
Yeah.
Hans Zimmer, I'm pretty sure, will be very proud of the work that he's done.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, out of all the adjectives we've used till now to describe music, I mean, we've used fairly positive adjectives, but I remember reading an article on the internet which called Interstellar's film score is terrifying. And when I was looking into this more, like we mentioned, the sound of silence is completely different than the sound of time, right? And that's when I came to know that Interstellar actually uses a filmmaking technique known as the I think it's called the ticking clock technique or the time and point. It's a filmmaking technique, right? I think you will be able to tell me more since you're into cinema. But this storytelling technique, I think I found it really interesting. I think there's another scene where they go into the planet and he has to get back in time. And that's when this storytelling technique is used, and that makes the audience eagerly wait for what's happening. I mean, the storytelling technique is very, very famous in Indian cinema, where people come to defuse the bomb. So I'm used to that, and we've been conditioned to that sound. But it was new. I mean, to have it in Interstellar is pretty interesting.
And I of course, as a storytelling technique, it's very popular, right? So basically, it's when there's an action that has to be completed before a particular time, and it's a race against the clock where the character has to complete this action. So it's obviously a common staple in thriller films and action films and many Indian films. But the way Interstellar used the technique, you're right. It's not an outright use of the technique. It's more subtle. There are multiple ways in which you can use the technique. Of course, the climax scene that you're talking about is a classic example of the ticking clock technique. And you're right. I mean, I never looked at it from that angle until you did mention it. But yeah, it's a beautiful use of the technique, and it's a beautiful use of the music also in that scene. So I think it definitely deserves to be on this list. People will call it an obvious pick, but I think it's obvious for all the right reasons. So no regrets.
Yeah. So I'm not sure we saved the best for the last, but before you attack me in the comment section, I'm not a big fan of the Star Wars series, but I am a fan of the music. So the next movie we have on our list is the Star Wars series.
Yeah. I'm not I didn't watch the Star Wars movies till earlier this year. Like I've been very late to it.
Oh, that's interesting.
But yeah, I mean, I watched it very late because fundamentally I'm not a huge, from a young age, I've never been a huge fan of the fantasy sci-fi genre. Like it's not really appealed to me. But I think during lockdown, I've had a lot of time, and I started watching the trilogy, and I found it. Even Lord of the Rings, I just started watching. Like it's crazy, but I think Star Wars, especially, of course, it's you either love it or you don't. Like it's a kind of it's in that genre. Yeah, so if you're into it, you'll love it. If you're into the movies, you're going to love it. But I think what is very iconic for me is the Imperial March theme. Like, you don't have to love the movie. Like, you can have different opinions on the movie as such. But again, when we talk about iconic pieces of music in film, the Imperial March theme, I think when I said Pink Panther was probably one of the greatest theme songs for comedy, I think Imperial March is probably one of the most iconic pieces of music created for villains and evil. And when you see, especially in the second film of the trilogy, right, of the first trilogy, there's a shot that pans from above, and you see the entire Imperial troops that Darth Vader leads. The shots just going over there. the theme hits, right? That's the first time you hear the piece of music, and it's such a memorable piece of music. It's so iconic, and I think it's almost become like I think throughout the years, like with the help of the internet, it's become generally a theme song for evil. Like that's how iconic the movie, the piece of music is, and it's so ominous. It's so wonderful, and it perfectly set the tone for the film, and it shows you how evil they are. Like you feel how villainous these people are. And what's really interesting for me about that piece of music, of course, generally I think the movies, that all the three films in the first trilogy, I think they had great music. I'm not, of course, I'm focusing on the Imperial March theme, but I think generally the music score was brilliant. I think all the pieces of music that they composed for the films were absolutely amazing. I think outstanding, very well done. But the Imperial March in particular is so iconic as a piece of music, of its relationship and how it has transcended the film. Like it's gone past the world of film. There is this video of protesters in the US, in the recent US protests over Black Lives Matter. It's so iconic because there's this video of a protester who's standing on the streets, and he sees a bunch of cops just walk down the street where he is. And when he sees the cops walk past him, he just plays the Imperial March and he's just standing there. It was so iconic. Like, what a brilliant way to protest. Like, your opinions on the movement, of course, can differ, right? I mean, cannot, but I mean, I can understand you having a different opinion. But I think just as a piece of music, to see it transcend the world of film and to see it be used so iconically as a theme of evil, I think it's just wonderful. And like I said with Pink Panther, I think, or just generally, I think it's, forget evil, I think it's just generally one of the most iconic pieces of music for film. Like the Imperial March, I think it definitely deserves to be on this list, and I think it will be there in the list of, you go to any film lover and you ask them about background scores, the Star Wars and the Imperial March should be on that list. I mean, I don't think a list is complete without the inclusion of the Star Wars trilogy and that particular song, that particular track in that list.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, I have never been a fan of genres like fantasy, or I'm not a big fan of superhero movies either. So for me, these movies to stand out, I've always relied on music, which is like how you said, Superman or even Star Wars. Now we talk about it, I think it's the music which stands out. And I remember, although I'm not a fan, I've watched all the movies. One of my close friends, he used to take us to every Star Wars movie whenever it released, and coincidentally it would come out next to his birthday, so he would take all of us, and it didn't matter if we were fans of the movie, but we would go for the music and we would go for the popcorn. And I mean, so I can really relate to that when you said it's the music.
I think every group of friends has that one Star Wars fan who's going to drag everybody to the movie. But I think it's wonderful. I mean, that's the reason even I watched Star Wars, right? I've had friends who've been begging me to watch the movie for years, and I've just been putting it off, and I finally had time to do it.
Yeah. We come to the end of 5 movies. However, we'd also like to bring in a few special mentions. So, Vikas, do you have any recommendations or for our listeners, and do you have any special mentions for this list?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really want to run through the list without mentioning any Indian films. Of course, I apologize to most of you because I genuinely don't watch too many Bollywood films, so I'm not too aware of it. Right. But from the films I watch, there's this movie called Devar Magan. It's a Tamil film, Kamal Hassan. It's in the early 90s. I think there's this one song from the film, Potri Padadi Ponni. It's fundamentally very iconic because it's almost a meme now, right? It's become such a part of our lives that everybody in our generation knows the music, and even though the film came out nearly 30 years ago, it's an iconic piece of music. But in the film, I think what's amazing is the fact that, like you said, that same piece of music is used in multiple points of the movie, and it's used in multiple. They use it as a slow theme in the beginning, and they use it very energetically at one place, and it's used in a very emotional scene later on. It's just that it's the pace of the song changes, right? They play the tune very slowly at one point, and it's very energetic with drums in the background and percussion in the background at another point. And it's just the pace of the song changes, right? They play the tune very slowly at one point, and it's very energetic with drums in the background at another point. And it's just the pace of the song changes, right? They play the tune very slowly at one point, and it's very energetic with drums in the background and percussion in the background at another point. and it works every time. Like it works in an emotional scene, it works in a very happy, pumped up, festive scene, and it works in a very sad scene near the end. It works every single time, irrespective of how they've used the movie, and it's such a versatile tune. Of course, the movie is great, but I think when we are talking about scores and we are talking about music and cinema, I think that particular film, especially for this particular tune that's used multiple times throughout the movie, I think it's one of the most iconic pieces of music in Indian cinema, definitely.
And I think there's another song in the same Devan Magan album. It's called Inji Iduparagi. And
of course, yeah.
the song actually uses sounds from the mouth. And so if now we'd like to call it a cappella, but this is something which was done in the 80s and 90s, and that was very interesting as well. If you go back and listen to it, you'll know what I'm talking about and why I'm relating it back to a cappella. And so yeah, Devan Magan is a great choice. And I'd also like to bring in Hey Ram, since you mentioned Kamal Hassan's movies. Hey Ram is also a very brilliant album soundtrack by the maestro Ilayaraja. So do you have anything to say on that?
Yeah, I mean, Hey Ram, of course, I mean, both the films, Devan Magan and Hey Ram, the music composer is Ilayaraja. He's a legend. There's really no other way to put it. Like he's one of the greatest music composers in Indian cinema of all time. But I think with Hey Ram, it's again wonderful because, of course, Hey Ram is it's an intense movie, right? It's a very intense film.
Struggle.
Yeah, I mean, it's set during the independence era, and it's about the Hindu-Muslim riots and how one man faces the riots and how his personal journey of dealing with the riots and what how he sees the relationship between Hindus and Muslims and how it changes over time. So it's a very intense film. It's an intense drama, political thriller, however you want to call it. And I mean, it's been 20 years since the movie came out. I think we can reveal a bit of the plot. So basically, the protagonist in the movie is someone who at one point of time wants to assassinate Gandhi, right? That is one point, and he starts off being a very timid, a very normal character who's just in love with his wife, and he just wants to live every day, get away from his very conservative family, and live with his wife somewhere. So that's how he is. But he's pulled into this mess that is the riots in Calcutta, right? And he becomes very aggressive, and at one point he believes that it's his duty to kill Mahatma Gandhi. And there's this one particular song, Isail Thodangadamma.
Oh yeah, I wanted to bring that song up too. I mean, it's the song, it's the turning point of the movie. And I think that song also comes right after someone's intoxicated him. So way progressive and way ahead of its time. I think even the visuals of the song, they're very, very trippy. And
it's wonderful cinematography. I mean, he's intoxicated and he's just walking around, and he's in the stupor, and he's drunk, and and he becomes very, he's completely a different person that from what you saw in the beginning of the film and how you see him in the beginning of the movie. Very jovial, happy-go-lucky guy who's just hanging around, chilling with his friends and drinking and trying to be with his wife. But over here, you have a character who's drunk with power, and that's the metaphor of the intoxication, right? He's just drunk with aggressiveness, this new idea of what it means to be macho and what it means to be, he's in control of his own fate now, and he's, they've just decided that they're going to, assassinate this huge political leader, and he's drunk with power. And he there's also this angle to that scene where he feels that he has power over the woman, right? He feels that he has power over everything. Like he feels he has power over his wife. He feels he has, and the metaphors used in the movie are great. I think, of course, there's this scene of lovemaking in the beginning of the film, where he's very passive with his first wife in the beginning. But when it comes to this scene where we're talking about, I think his entire attitude changes, and he's very aggressive, and he's like, and the woman turns into a gun, which is, for many people who don't understand the metaphor behind it, like they don't see. In the beginning of the movie with his first wife, he's very passive, and it's the woman who's undressing him, so to speak, right? But over here, he's very aggressive. He's throwing the woman around. Of course, it's not a very pleasant thing to watch. It's a very intense scene, and you're looking at him and you're thinking, what the hell has happened to this man? How has he changed so much? And Isail Thodangadamma playing in the background really makes the impact 10 times more. And I think it's one of the wonderful pieces. Again, very iconic piece of music, but also I think it shouldn't overshadow the rest of the background score that Ilayaraja has done for the movie. One very important thing about this is Ilayaraja was not supposed to be the first composer of the movie. Like when we did talk about Rocky, there's this interview in which Kamal Haasan says one of the very first films in the song, it had already been composed with a different music director, and the cinematography and the video had already been shot, but then they had creative differences and the initial music director was replaced, and they didn't have the budget to reshoot the song. So Ilayaraja had to compose an entirely new tune, but the new tune had to go with visuals that were already shot and that were already placed in the film. And he had to compose an entirely new tune, and it's not visuals it's not like a background score. It's a song where actors are singing and dancing and their lips are moving, and Ilayaraja had to compose a new tune to match all of that at the same time, and he did it beautifully. He just, as a film, it's a masterpiece that everyone must watch, but I think the music of the movie is also something that deserves recognition.
Yeah, I mean, it's extremely challenging for a composer to re-record a previously recorded scene, and that's what also makes this movie really, really special. And I mean, this movie is not restricted to one language. I mean, for the most part, it is in Tamil, but there are a lot of parts in the movie. I think the first half, and then after he meets Shah Rukh Khan again in the second half, there's a lot of Hindi going on. So I mean, you guys can definitely watch it.
It's also a bilingual film. I think there's a Hindi version of the film, so the entire movie is in Hindi. So I think people can watch the Hindi version too, and it has a lot of North Indian actors. Right? Shah Rukh Khan does a very brilliant job, and he has I don't know if I can call it an extended cameo or a proper role, but he plays a very important character in the movie. And there are many other North Indian actors, and it's a pan-Indian film. I mean, I think it's very unfair to restrict it to it's a Tamil film or it's a South Indian film.
I think this was also Kamal Haasan's directorial debut, if I'm not wrong.
I think it was his directorial debut. So it was the first film he directed, and I think in Indian films, I think it's one of the best debuts I've seen from a director. I think it was nominated for the Oscars. It was our official submission to the Academy Awards that year. And I think it would be a wonderful watch for anybody. I mean, if you're just into films and if you want to watch some classic Indian movies, came out in 2000. Rani Mukherjee is in the movie, Shah Rukh Khan's in the movie, so a lot of familiar faces. And I think it's a wonderful watch. Definitely recommend.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not into movies, you can watch it for the music, like we just described. So I think that comes to the end of our episode for today, and it was lovely having Vikas, and I think had a really interesting conversation. So it was a really fun experience with you.
It was great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I had a wonderful time talking movies and music.
Yeah, thank you guys. So you can join us for episode 3, which will be coming out soon, and we also have very interesting topics like this lined up for you. So until next time.